It was a regular Tuesday morning at Crestwood High. I was sitting in Mr. Thompson's history class, trying to stay awake while he droned on about the Civil War. The clock on the wall seemed to be moving in slow motion, and I was just counting down the minutes until lunch. Suddenly, the PA system crackled to life. Principal Jenkins' voice came through, sounding unusually tense. "Attention, students and staff. We are now under a lockdown. This is not a drill. Please follow lockdown procedures immediately." A murmur of confusion rippled through the classroom. Mr. Thompson quickly sprang into action, motioning for us to get down and move to the corner of the room away from the door and windows. We all scrambled to our feet, grabbing our backpacks and shuffling to the designated safe spot. "Everyone, stay calm and stay quiet," Mr. Thompson whispered as he locked the classroom door and turned off the lights. I huddled next to my best friend, Mia, my heart pounding in my chest. We exchanged worried glances, neither of us knowing what was happening. The room was eerily silent, apart from the faint hum of the air conditioning and the occasional nervous cough. Minutes felt like hours as we sat there in the dimly lit room. My mind raced with possibilities. Was there a dangerous person on campus? A fight? A bomb threat? I glanced at my phone, but we had been told to keep them off during class, and I didn't want to risk getting in trouble by turning it on. Just then, we heard faint footsteps echoing down the hallway. My breath caught in my throat as the footsteps grew louder and closer. Whoever it was, they were moving slowly, almost methodically. Mr. Thompson put a finger to his lips, signaling us to stay silent. The footsteps stopped right outside our door. I could see the shadow of someone standing there through the small window. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. The doorknob rattled slightly, but the door remained locked. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps started again, moving away this time. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room, but we remained huddled in our corner, too scared to move. I could feel Mia trembling next to me, and I reached out to squeeze her hand for reassurance. After what seemed like forever, the PA system crackled again. "Attention, students and staff. The lockdown has been lifted. You may resume your normal activities. Thank you for your cooperation." Mr. Thompson stood up and turned the lights back on. "All right, everyone, you can return to your seats," he said, his voice still shaky. "But please, stay calm and quiet. We don't have all the details yet." We slowly got up and made our way back to our desks, the tension in the room still palpable. Some students pulled out their phones to text their parents, while others whispered anxiously to their friends. A few minutes later, Principal Jenkins came on the PA again. "Thank you for your cooperation during the lockdown. There was an incident involving an unauthorized person on campus, but the situation has been resolved. The individual is in custody, and everyone is safe. Please continue with your day as normal, and remember that counselors are available if you need to talk to someone." Relief washed over me, but I couldn't shake the lingering fear. The rest of the day passed in a blur, and I found it hard to focus on anything. By the time the final bell rang, I was more than ready to go home. As I walked out of the building, I saw my mom waiting for me in the car. I hurried over and climbed in, feeling safe for the first time all day. "Are you okay?" she asked, looking worried. "Yeah, I'm fine now," I replied, forcing a smile. "It was just really scary." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you're safe." The drive home was quiet, and I spent the evening trying to process everything that had happened. It was a day I would never forget. and it made me appreciate the sense of safety and normalcy that I had always taken for granted. It was a typical Friday afternoon at Westbrook Middle School. The final bell had rung, and students were bustling about, eager to start their weekend. I was at my locker, grabbing my books and chatting with my friend Alex about our plans for the weekend. Suddenly, the principal's voice came over the PA system, startling everyone. "Attention, students and staff. We are now under a lockdown. This is not a drill. Please proceed to the nearest classroom and follow lockdown procedures immediately." The hallways fell silent as everyone processed the announcement. Teachers quickly ushered us into the nearest classrooms. I ended up in Mrs. Patterson's English room, along with about 20 other students who had been nearby. She quickly locked the door and turned off the lights, her face tense but calm. "Everyone, get down and stay away from the windows," she instructed us in a hushed voice. We all moved to the back corner of the room, trying to stay as quiet as possible. The only sounds were the faint hum of the air conditioning and the rustling of backpacks as we settled in. I huddled next to Alex, my heart pounding in my chest. I could see the fear in his eyes, mirroring my own. We had no idea what was happening, but the serious tone of the announcement made it clear it wasn't good. Minutes ticked by slowly. I glanced around the room, seeing the worried faces of my classmates. Some had their phones out, texting their parents or checking for updates, but I had left mine in my locker. I regretted that decision now, feeling more isolated without any way to communicate with the outside world. After what felt like an eternity, we heard footsteps in the hallway. My breath caught in my throat as the footsteps drew closer and closer. The sound stopped right outside our door. I held my breath, straining to hear any sign of what might be happening. The doorknob jiggled slightly, and I could see a shadow through the small window. Mrs. Patterson put a finger to her lips, reminding us to stay silent. The shadow moved away, and the footsteps resumed, fading into the distance. A collective sigh of relief went through the room, but the tension remained thick in the air. We stayed huddled in our corner, waiting for any further instructions. Finally, the PA system crackled to life again. "Attention, students and staff. The lockdown has been lifted. You may return to your normal activities. Thank you for your cooperation." Mrs. Patterson stood up and turned the lights back on. "All right, everyone. You can go back to your lockers and gather your things," she said, her voice still shaky. "Please stay calm and orderly." We slowly got up and made our way back to our lockers. The hallways were filled with nervous chatter as students shared their experiences and speculated about what had happened. I retrieved my phone from my locker and immediately called my mom to let her know I was okay. A few minutes later, Principal Harris came on the PA again. "Thank you for your cooperation during the lockdown. There was an incident involving a suspicious individual on campus, but the situation has been resolved. The person has been apprehended, and everyone is safe. Counselors are available if you need to talk to someone." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I couldn't shake the lingering fear. The rest of the day passed in a blur, and I found it hard to focus on anything. By the time I got home, I was exhausted from the emotional strain. As I walked through the door, my mom pulled me into a tight hug. "I'm so glad you're safe," she said, her voice trembling. "Me too," I replied, finally letting myself relax. It was really scary. We spent the evening talking about what had happened and trying to unwind. It was a day I would never forget, a stark reminder of how quickly things can change and how important it is to stay vigilant. It was a sunny Thursday afternoon at Riverdale High. I was in the middle of a math test, struggling through algebra problems and trying to concentrate. The room was silent except for the occasional sound of pencils scratching on paper and the rustle of pages being turned. Out of nowhere, the PA system beeped and Principal Martinez's voice came on, sounding more serious than I'd ever heard it. "Attention, students and staff. We are now under a lockdown. This is not a drill. Please proceed with lockdown procedures immediately." My heart skipped a beat. Mrs. Jensen, our math teacher, quickly stood up and told us to get up from our desks and move to the back of the room. She locked the door and turned off the lights, her face pale but composed. "Everyone, stay quiet and stay calm," she whispered. "We'll be fine. Just follow instructions." I ended up crouched next to my friend Lucas. We exchanged nervous glances, neither of us knowing what was going on. The room was eerily silent, save for the muffled sounds of footsteps and hushed voices from other classrooms. I tried to take deep breaths to calm myself down, but my mind was racing with questions. Was there someone dangerous in the school? Had there been an accident? I had no way of knowing. I felt for my phone in my pocket, but didn't dare turn it on. The last thing I wanted was to draw attention to us. Minutes dragged by, each one feeling like an hour. The tension in the room was palpable. My muscles were starting to ache from crouching, but I didn't dare move. Mrs. Jensen kept her eyes fixed on the door, ready to act if anything happened. Suddenly, we heard footsteps in the hallway. My heart pounded in my chest as the footsteps grew louder and closer. They stopped right outside our door. I could see a shadow through the small window, and the doorknob rattled slightly. Mrs. Jensen motioned for us to stay absolutely still and silent. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps moved on, growing fainter until they disappeared altogether. A collective sigh of relief went through the room, but we didn't move from our spot. We waited in tense silence, hoping for some kind of update. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the PA system crackled again. "Attention, students and staff. The lockdown has been lifted. You may resume your normal activities. Thank you for your cooperation." Mrs. Jensen stood up and turned the lights back on. "All right, everyone, you can return to your desks," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But please, remain calm and quiet." We slowly got up and made our way back to our desks. Some students pulled out their phones to text their parents, while others whispered anxiously to their friends. The atmosphere in the room was still tense, but we were starting to relax a little. A few minutes later, Principal Martinez came on the PA again. "Thank you for your cooperation during the lockdown. There was a report of an intruder on campus, but the situation has been resolved. The individual has been apprehended, and everyone is safe. Counselors are available if you need to talk to someone." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I still couldn't shake the lingering fear. The rest of the school day passed in a blur, and I found it hard to focus on anything. By the time the final bell rang, I was more than ready to go home. As I walked out of the building, I saw my dad waiting for me in the car. I hurried over and climbed in, feeling a sense of safety wash over me. "Are you okay?" he asked, looking concerned. "Yeah, I'm fine now," I replied, trying to smile. "It was just really scary." He nodded and reached over to give my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "I'm glad you're safe. Let's get you home." The drive home was quiet, and I spent the evening trying to process everything that had happened. It was a day I would never forget, and it made me appreciate the safety and normalcy of everyday life even more.